Welcome back to Just Us, legal infotainment put on by Vincent and Desilets, Just Us Law Group, LLC. I'm Lisa Vincent, and I'm joined again by attorney Ani Desilets, who's here with me today. Last episode, we were talking about the Michelle Troconis trial that was going on in Stamford, and some of the public ideas that people have about what the law is, what justice is, what it looks like, and how, some of the legal day-to-day realities of that are really quite different from what the public image actually is. And you had actually spoken about maybe unlearning, needing to unlearn in order to have a more accurate understanding of what goes on day to day. Ideas about being innocent until proven guilty, entitled to a jury trial, having a jury of your peers, reasonable expectations that you're going to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt before anything bad happens to you. Basically, even if you're accused, you have that right. But in reality, that's not what we see day to day, is it?
No. Just thinking in terms of the right to a speedy trial and the concept probably inadvertent that things progress at a pretty rapid pace, right? That you don't have to wait to have access to the courts. So in thinking of, criminal cases, and the reality of the matter is whether you're going to trial or you're accepting some kind of plea from the state, you're probably going to spend the next 2 years of your life going back to the criminal court and having multiple appearances, multiple times, where nothing happens, and it's just going to go on like that. That's the criminal court, or the notion of these high octane trials and whatnot, and the reality being that 97 or some greater percent end up in pleas. Also different in the child protection or in the juvenile court. Also different in the probate court, even in the family court. So very different in practice, or in the different areas of law versus what the public, I think, perceives the law to be, or the practice of the law.
Yeah, so one of the things that was really surprising to me on some level, and something that I continue to wrestle with just day to day, is the level of deprivation that people can experience prior to any type of trial, right? So in Connecticut, and I think it's the same in all 50 states pursuant to federal law, that, the government, DCF, in this state, it's known as DCF, the Department of Children and Families. But even doctors, when you're talking about, maybe a patient with a psychiatric need, it could be a doctor. There are various mechanisms for people to be deprived in a very serious way by either having their children removed from their care, or having an adult, be committed to a hospital prior to any type of hearing, right? In the criminal arena, a person who's arrested can have a protective order put in place that absolutely prohibits them from even living in their own home sometimes, or having contact with others, or turning in their firearms. These are all very, very serious matters, and I'm not sure the public is aware that those things can be taken from people prior to any type of hearing, just based on the words of one person, perhaps, to say that action is necessary. Did you find that equally surprising to you? Did you have a better sense of that, or?
Do you mean just within one area of law? You mean across the board, or what do you mean?
I mean, I'm really talking about across the board. I think, most of what we do involves either child protection, where children are removed from their homes and placed into foster care prior to any type of judge, hearing any type of evidence. Or in the criminal arena, these protective orders that enter kind of as a matter of course, where people, potentially are barred from being in their own home, or barred from having contact with their own family members. I think I really was surprised by that when I started, and I continue to be disturbed by it when I see it.
I think I was surprised by it, but I think also that, at least when you talk about child protection, I think that those who haven't experienced it firsthand or maybe really aren't in the system, maybe some people even in the system, just assume that it's in the public benefit to take these actions, right? That children just have to be protected, right? And so whether that means deprivation of rights to a parent, the child's safety must come first. And I think the public might have the same perception with weapons too, and those kinds. Like society, I think, is willing to tolerate certain individual deprivations so long as it's not them, right? Um, and I'm thinking right now about the Vander Ark trial. Are you're aware of that? That's the a mother who had tortured her special needs child to death, and actually got the older son to take part in this, and he died. She was studying to be an attorney, or she had just passed the bar. She was brilliant, but behind the scenes was basically torturing this child, and using her older son to torture the child. And he accepted a plea and got a lesser sentence. And then after she was convicted, her rights were terminated. So I guess I bring this up only to say that I think that a lot of people, when they picture child protection, that's what they're picturing, right? They're picturing parents who've like really done something awful to their children. Such would warrant the government stripping people of their rights because it's necessary, right? I really do believe that we're just willing, I think, to sacrifice some of those individual rights for the greater good, if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes perfect sense. I think that's absolutely, nobody wants to tolerate child abuse, right? And everybody, I think most decent humans would say that a child should absolutely be protected. And if that means, that the parents' rights are trampled for a brief moment while we wait for them to have a fair trial, I think that people accept that as a cost of living in a humane and decent society, right? That we protect the children. But I do think it's important for, members of the public to know what really happens, right? So if the government comes in and there's a basis to take a child, you know, we a social worker or a physician can write up an affidavit just swearing to the serious things that have occurred. That goes to a judge. The parents are not there at the time that is signed. The reality is when those cases come into our office, we tell people, and I think we tell them honestly, that their involvement with the court system under a best case scenario is gonna take a year or longer to navigate that situation. I think when people perceive justice, justice delayed is justice denied, right? But in fact, the wheels of justice do turn slowly. We see that every day. If you take it back to the Michelle Troconis trial, that crime now is several years old. 4 or 5 at years. This point. A lot has happened. So it doesn't happen overnight. And in the meantime, people's lives go on, and those deprivations can persist for an extended period of time. We could talk about that as well in terms of people accused of a crime who end up incarcerated. I know that's a passion of yours. So what is your take on that, the other side of that, the criminal side?
Well, I think it's a balance because, with the right to a speedy trial, you want to get it right. If you're going to go to trial, if you're going to be of that 3%, right, you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and you're prepared to fight against the state's machinery, assuming it's a pretty serious charge, right? Um, if you're not going to trial, you're just basically, when you're in the criminal court, you're just trying to sort of get the best deal you can for your client. Um, a lot of it just is negotiating and whatnot. Um, but it's certainly, seeing it in practice, I know we've had cases even in DCF, child protection cases, that have gone on over 4 years. Children that were taken at birth are now in kindergarten
Right.
on conditions that were long remediated years ago. So it's certainly striking and could probably be a show in and of itself. Um,
You and I have seen a couple of cases where children have gone home from foster care after years of time. Um, very traumatic experience for all concerned, right? In
sure.
terms of the foster parents who've cared for those children, in terms of the parents who are, receiving a child back that is just developmentally not the same child that they lost long ago, um, and certainly difficult, for the child. The fact of the matter is, though, in terms of the child protection cases, at least, it's not just the legal system that gets involved in that. It's not just the legal system. It's not just the Department of Children and Families. And there's all these other moving parts, which I think is um, really a large aspect of our work, and I think the work of many lawyers that isn't in the public view, right? The hours of time, spent reading medical records and therapy notes and talking to people and trying to piece things together. What does that actually look like for you, handling a case of a case that's gone on for a couple of years? What does that actually involve?
Just knowing, for me, what's key is knowing the intricate history from soup to nuts and start to finish, right? Every major incident that transpired, every change, every provider who is involved, whether it's a medical provider or a mental health provider, talking to those people, reports, just charts and diagrams and maps and timelines. And I'm glad to be putting, I worked in social services for some time between graduate school and law school, and I'm glad to sort of be able to put some of the mental health work to use in understanding the various diagnoses and the medications when we're talking about mental health and whatnot. And it's kind of like being a detective. And you laugh at me when you come in my office sometimes. It's kind of like we watch these detective shows and they have a whole wall taken up of just all the suspects. It's kind of the same, right? You need that kind of command to really be able to fight for people and advocate well. You have to know, because the department has a whole team of people fighting for their interests, So you need that time and resource, and it's hard. It's hard if you're a public defender and you have a pretty significant caseload, or even if you're a private attorney and you have a pretty significant caseload. It's hard to find the resources in our office. We tag team off each other, and that's really helpful to be able to share that. But it's not easy for sure.
Yeah, so one of the things I'm hoping for, send an invitation out there to our viewership, all of these different people that come into contact with kids and families in our state, the way our laws are here, very, very broad, very, very extensive mandatory reporting laws, right? There's a pretty good chance that a child is going to have some interaction with our child protection system. If you look at an average child over 18 years of life, it's many people come to the attention of the system that aren't victims of abuse per
Even if it's
se.
the children calling on the parents that they took their cell phone or something, we get those calls too.
Yes, we do. Children seem to think that they have a legal right to cell phones at this point. It's kind of comical. But all of the different systems, the mental health system, the healthcare system, the justice system, um, the housing situation and dealing with evictions and, employment, unemployment, disability, all of these different issues come together. And we really spend a lot of time. I think a single case can touch on so many different fundamental issues in different systems. We spend a lot of time talking to those people, getting records from various things, trying to understand all of the different stories that people bring. And so really hoping to have a conversation with some of those other people who come at this from a different area, right? Everybody understands their own role. People bring their own views to the situation. I'm not sure that there's a real broad understanding of how that all plays out, right? So really hoping that, some mental health professionals, maybe some hospital staff, maybe somebody who's dealing with the housing crisis. I mean, housing alone is a barrier for many families living in our state. There's a very big homeless crisis here in Connecticut.
Whether or not they're entangled with the child welfare system or not, yeah.
Right. All of these things that bring families into this system where, there's scrutiny going on. But it would be really interesting to understand from the perspective of some other folks in terms of what their work is involves. A lot of time and a lot of money spent, covering various aspects of child protection. But at the end of the day, my interest is in what happens in court, right? And so what happens in court is not a trial by jury. There's no jury. It's a trial by judge, right? And there's no open courtroom. It's a closed courtroom. And innocent until proven guilty is really not how it is day to day. In fact, sometimes it feels very much the opposite of that, where we sometimes assume the worst, assume that we need to protect the child to the highest degree.
I would call it erring on the side of guilt.
Erring on the side of guilt.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we're willing to sacrifice the rights of the individual to the noble, and it is, right, to the noble goal of child protection. So erring on the side of guilt because it's because.
Well, right.
Are you willing to say no?
It's very hard
Right.
to persuade people to say no, but we try our best sometimes, right? Because we get to know people, and when you get to the bottom of these cases, they're really all just people. They all have a story to tell. That's why you spend so much time. It's a kind of a running joke, right? We can run the big, huge easel pads out of paper on the walls, just laying out people's story, trying to get all the facts right, all the dates, the timelines, and all of that, right? Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to the story, right? You have a judge who's going to make major decisions. Maybe it takes you a year to get to a trial. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the story, right? And whether or not a judge can be persuaded to believe the story. And in our modern system, I'd be curious your take on this, but it's not always easy to tell a story
Coherently.
in the courtroom with the rules that are in place. Telling the story of those people really is, from my perspective, the most important aspect of our job. And that's why we spend all that time talking to other people, right? Trying to build that image. Um, do you find yourself, at the end of the day, do you think justice is had in the majority of cases?
Mm. What does justice look like? And I don't think it looks the same in every forum. Um, these are people. I think when you're talking about criminals, right? It's somewhat easier because it's like you've allegedly committed this crime. You you get sentenced. You lose time. You lose something. But how would you quantify or explain what happens to these people over the years as they're being punished as the case is going on, right? As they're in the child welfare system, being punished on a regular daily basis, right? Is that making sense?
I think many people who are participating in that system absolutely feel punished. They feel like they're being punished.
Surveilled, punished. Um,
I mean, that's the perception of people, right? So if we're going to come out here and talk about justice, right? Justice means different things to different people, different situation. Justice looks different in every case, like you said. But at the end of the day, I think at our office we respect it and we talk about it and we think about it. But at the end of the day, this justice system that we function within is intended to serve the people, right? The people, and we often joke, the client that we bring to court maybe is the only person who's not being paid to sit through that legal proceeding. And their perspective on whether they got justice or not matters. It does matter. Um, and I think that's what sets us apart in some ways, is trying to contribute in whatever way we can to the perception that there is justice.
or feeling heard or feeling validated.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because we don't want people to feel punished while they're going through the system, right? But I think the reality is that people do feel that way. I think our audience, there will be people in our audience who absolutely resonate with that perception. And as part of the reason to come out here and do the show, right, is to have some type of positive impact on that, on how that looks.
Agreed.
So, in terms of the laws, we really only got to talk about the juvenile court today. We really do a lot in family court as well. Family court is its own vicious beast. Criminal court is its own place to be. Perhaps it's more publicly visible. People think about justice system, they do think of crime automatically. I think some of these other forums are less thought about. But at the end of the day, the public does have an obligation, perhaps certainly a privilege, of participating in the system, right? People have the right and the opportunity to participate in the system, which kind of brings me to, people's perception of how laws are created, right? So what do you think the main perception is of how laws are created, or what makes the law?
Money, power, influence.
Yeah, as compared to what's real.
That's not money, power, influence.
Well, money, power, influence, absolutely, but it is a government of, by, and for the people, and it is essential, it is absolutely essential for people to be accountable for knowing what their system looks like and for participating in the process, right? Because the process can spin out of control without people being aware. So recognizing, we're filming this at the end of January, hopefully airing in the next couple of weeks. And so what's happening right now, to anybody out there who has had experiences in our legal system, who feels in any type of way victimized or punished, as you said, to understand that the Connecticut legislative season is starting February 7th. That public lawmaking process is where the opportunity presents, at least on some level, for people to be heard about their experiences, to be heard about the laws, how they would like things to be, or to have a say on the laws. Have you participated in the lawmaking process? Do you have familiarity with it, or?
I'm embarrassed to say no.
Right.
I definitely protesting and grassroots organizing and whatnot, but not directly in any kind of legislative meet your legislator or attend this subcommittee hearing or nothing like that. No.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest and say that before I went to law school and became a lawyer, as interested as I was, and I've always been interested in it, did I participate in the lawmaking process? No, absolutely not. I didn't. Have I submitted testimony since becoming a lawyer as I've learned? Absolutely.
Oh, does that count if I've watched things since becoming a lawyer? Because I have.
Watched things since.
Yes, I've watched committee meetings.
Yeah.
On public TV.
So, I think we want to open a conversation here. We really want to have a dialogue with our viewers. Certainly welcome people to provide feedback on any of our online forums or by reaching out to the office directly. But I think we have to continue the conversation. I think we want to educate people, but we also want to invite our viewers to participate in the system and bring things to our attention as well. So I think for today, that's a wrap. I know we're looking forward to future episodes, and we appreciate all of our viewers and the people here at Nutmeg TV for the opportunity. Thank you.
Follow us on Instagram at nutmeg.tv. The water's warm at Jaws Pond, and we're stocked full of treasures. Big or small, we buy it all. We buy and sell fast rides, power tools, vintage guitars, and so much more. Walk the plank in style with our fine jewelry, diamonds, and watches. Plus, we have a huge selection of the latest video games, including the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Jaws Pond, conveniently located on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in Southington and West Main Street in New Britain.